Two, one, we're live. Welcome to Fresh Takes. We're so excited to be here on this wonderful afternoon right after a holiday weekend where people came together to remember those who sacrificed their life for the freedom and liberation of this country in which we live in. For those that live outside of the U.S., it is our day we call Memorial Day, where we thank the soldiers and the families who sacrificed so much for so many. And so we are so glad to have you all here with us on today as we dive back into this conversation about racism is as much of a sin as abortion. We're going to pause to allow folks to come on in and join us here. We are excited about today's conversation. We are excited about what we're doing as it relates to this discussion. And yesterday, as we was doing the memorial thing, and I was thinking, I was like, wow, the number of Black soldiers that gave their lives in so many wars, and yet they weren't recognized by this country that they served. The amazing thing, and so yesterday, my salute was to all of those soldiers who died in the Civil War, to those who died in World War One, World War Two, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, who all had to come back to a country that did not even respect them as men. I saluted all those soldiers because I think, once again, that systematic racism has played a huge role inside of that. So I just wanted to make sure as we go into this discussion today, I am excited. My brother Larry said, boy, you got a lot of energy today. I was like, yeah, I got some rest. So I'm really ready to go and hit this. So last week we gave,
Kabrina,
yes.
real quick. Show them your shirt.
Oh. I love this, my shirt. My friend Quick got me this shirt straight out of context. Theology matters. Theology matters. Yes, I love my shirt. He messed with me, but yeah, I'm glad to have y'all know I don't usually wear the casual stuff. I usually have a nice dress on. But today I wanted to show off my T-shirt. Yes, my friend.
She's amped up.
Go ahead.
I'm amped up. But anyway, last week we talked about racism. We defined it from the European majority culture, dominant culture definition of it. And then we gave the definition in which we're addressing the topic. And we see racism as something that is wrapped around power. Culture. So it's hard for an individual to be a racist if they don't have power to make systematic legislation, systematic policies, systematic laws that oppress other people. So you can't be racist if you don't have that type of power to make those types of changes. The second thing we talked about is this whole European Christian evangelical fundamental and conservative Protestants who are ignoring that racism is a sin, and they're not taking any actions in their congregations, nor are they standing up and speaking truth to power. And so last week we had a really extremely good, solid conversation around what is this thing called racism being defined, how we see it as much of a sin as an abortion because it is about the value of life, a living life, and then our brothers and sisters who are ignoring it. So today we knew when we came up with this topic, it wasn't going to make it through just one session. It was going to take two or more. And so today we want to dive into, in order for racism to flourish, there are some things that have to happen with those that are in a dominant position and those who are in a position of oppression. And then we want to really get into this whole thing about how do we as believers, we as those that profess being followers of the way, how do we combat this thing called racism? Because we got some power, we got some followers, we have voice. How do we make a difference? And so I am delighted to have my two brothers with me again, Larry and LaMonte. LaMonte looking all spiffy and stuff, cool as I don't know what. Yeah, he got it going on.
I got to do a homegoing for one of my good members today.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
got to
My
do a home
condolences.
for one of my good members. So, in honor of
Hey,
her,
hey,
the Sandy Boswell, she was one of a kind,
Oh,
yeah, she's
and
one of a kind. Hey, Dr.
she's one of
King,
a kind. Larry met her.
Dr.
But
King,
good to
Dr.
be here. Good to see both of you. God bless you. And right off the top, Kabrina, in the news this morning,
Mm-hmm.
there was a black man arrested, I think, for forgery in Minneapolis.
mm,
And they arrested him, handcuffed him, threw him on the ground. The policeman put his knee on his neck while the other one stood there. People started filming. He said, "Sir," like Eric Gardner, "Sir, I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe. Can you loosen up?" He kept the knee there 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Then they called the paramedics. And as the video went on, the longer he kept the knee on them, the less he moved. After a while, he wasn't moving at all. They called the paramedics, only to report a little later, he's now dead.
Mm.
This is the same place that the Orlando Castile incident happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know what happens in police departments where they see this over and over again, and then it happens again in another police department or the same police department. Also, in Central Park in New York, there was a brother who was a bird watcher. Now, he's rare. He's rarer than the birds. A brother that watches birds is rare. He's in the park. He sees a young Caucasian woman with a dog off a leash in an area where you're supposed to have a leash. He says, "Ma'am, put the dog on the leash." She raises her voice, pulls out her phone, dials 911, says she's afraid for her life. And the whole thing was filmed. Otherwise, people would not believe it.
Mm.
And so again, this racism issue is as big a sin as abortion, and yet it's not treated like that, particularly by the evangelical church of the majority culture.
Exactly.
They don't look at it nearly as serious. So again, we just did the show last week, and we got 2 incidents this week that we know about.
That we know about, right, right. And if it weren't for social media, we might not know about it. Exactly.
yeah, I want to chime in on that Central Park incident. The young lady came back and she apologized, but if you read on in the article, her employer put her on suspension because of the
Yes.
actions. So there
Right.
was some consequence, and I'm sure that apology came out of the fact that, yeah, her company is not tolerating. And so they're doing an investigation, but I don't think you got to investigate too far when there's a tape that show you exactly what she's doing. Exactly the fact that her dog through the whole conversation was never put on a leash. So who was terrified for their life should have been the young man, because this dog is out here and his owner is screaming and is irate, and so that causes the dog to go into the defense mode. So he was more in danger than she was, but that's the world we live in, and she knows, because that's why she called the police. She knows the trigger words. She used trigger words. So yeah,
Wow.
you wasn't just excited. No, you were calculating in that. So I got some issues. Everybody know I got issues. So I'm gonna be quiet right now so we can move forward and talk about this whole thing.
So check this out. To both of you, we live in a world. Unfortunately, we live in a world that racism is a part of our world.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is, can we have any part to play in making racism flourish? Now, I want to submit to both of you that not only do the dominant individuals in our culture make it flourish, but also the oppressed make it flourish. It's all about,
elaborate on that.
It's all how we handle it. So when we as the oppressed, Black peoples, brown peoples, oppressed peoples, forget what has happened to us historically because things seem to be better than what they were in the old days. And we don't continue to bring voice, and we don't continue to lift up the atrocities that just happened with those 2 occasions. That helps racism to flourish. We have to bring voice, we have to bring video to these situations and let dominant culture know we're not putting up with it at all. So Dr. King, in that sense, the oppressed even can play a part in racism still flourishing. You got what I'm saying?
Yes. What kinds of things do the oppressor, talk about some of the kinds of things the oppressor does to allow it to go on. And then let's talk about the kinds of things, as you said, even the oppressed do, because that sounds strange to my ears. Initially, I want to reject that statement that if I'm oppressed, I may perpetuate this. But let's talk about the dominant culture. Obviously, one of the things that happens is they have the power.
Mm-hmm.
And because they have the power, we're consciously aware that it can be used against us and it can punish us.
Mm-hmm.
As she just mentioned in the case in Central Park, the fact that the voice sounded like a Caucasian woman.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about a big black man.
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of words, I can see how that power can be used. I'm also aware, Dr. Harris, Kabrina, I fit what's known as, are y'all ready? A good color guy. That LaMonte's a good color guy.
He's a good color guy.
Look, I used to have no mustache, no beard, short hair, kind of medium brown skin. He's a good color guy. I knew how to dress like corporate America, use corporate language, so forth and so on, which fork to use, the salad fork, or whatever, what glass to drink out of. And I fit a thing called a good color guy.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what that means is I'm a person who basically assimilates. So when they see how I carry myself, my dress, they say, LaMonte's like us.
Mm-hmm.
And he pretty much has views like us.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then, Dr. Harris, they would even drop their guard and say stuff around me
Exactly.
that was offensive because they thought I'm like them or I'm different.
Exactly.
And so I know they have code language, code words. I know that if I were to get loud or angry, it's perceived worse than my colleague. I become an angry black man.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to watch things like that.
Mm-hmm. So, because you were seen as a good colored guy,
Mm-hmm.
one of the other takes that makes racism flourish from my viewpoint is when the oppressed, let's put you in that case, when you lie to the truth of what our experience has been historically and what our experience is even today. The fact of the matter is whoever is in power and they're trying to make us assimilate and we act as though we're all on equal playing field is a misnomer. We're not all on equal playing field.
Right.
And so we have to recognize we got to quit lying to ourselves and lying to others as though everything's all right because we had a black president.
Not the black president.
Not the black.
They think that's the equalizer. Now let me ask y'all this. I think Barack Obama was the 44th president, right?
Yep, that's who he was.
Up to that point, there was 43 other presidents of the United States.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The one that came after him, we don't even call him by name. We say 45.
46
Correct.
minus 1.
So you're talking about 44 individuals that are reflective of the dominant culture,
Right.
all right, that have always been in power, and to their liking, they want to keep it that way because that's how you make America great again.
Okay.
So the reason why
did you say great again or did you say white again? I'm on my iPad. Sometimes I can't hear that well.
See, there you go. There you go, cutting up.
My iPad. Kabrina, did he say great again or white again?
You know, those are trigger words. He said one thing, but we heard something totally different.
Okay.
It's our cultural bias that does not allow us to hear that.
Even if we don't hear it, we see it. It's always put right up in our face everywhere we go. So on college campuses, in think tanks and conversations, sociological conversations, questions would be asked by Caucasian students. Why do you need Ebony magazine? Why do you need Jet magazine? Okay. Why do you need all this representation of Black? It's because dominant culture ignores us. Yeah. We don't see ourselves in multimedia fashion. And so we have to bring it to the table. And we have to stop lying to ourselves, saying that everything is equal. Because see, there's a difference between equality. Can I get a witness? All right. I'm trying to talk to y'all.
Equality and what?
And having, well, what's the other word, Kabrina?
Equity.
And equality. Equality.
And liberation.
And then there's one more.
Liberation. Freedom. Okay.
So here's the picture, Dr. King.
All right.
We're at a ball field. Mm-hmm. We have a tall individual, we have a mid-sized individual, and we have a short individual.
All right.
But there's a fence around the ball field. Mm-hmm. Well, the tall individual can naturally see over the fence.
Okay.
The mid-sized individual can see over the fence if they have a box.
Okay.
The smallest individual needs a box too, but still can't see over the fence.
He needs like 2 boxes or something.
He needs 2 boxes. But see, this is where equality shades the whole issue. Equality says we're going to give everybody a box. So the tall individual gets a box, the mid-sized individual gets a box, and the small individual gets a box. And guess what? The taller person still sees more.
Right.
The mid-sized person sees a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And the shortest person barely sees anything.
Okay.
That's equality. All right.
They all got a box.
Here's equity. Equity is take the box away from the tallest person. Allow the mid-sized person to keep his box. Give the shortest person the tallest person's box, so he'll have 2 boxes.
So now everybody can see.
Everybody can see over the fence equally. All right. That's equity. But here's liberation. Liberation is take the daggone fence down.
Okay. Then we won't have, okay.
Do you see the picture?
Okay, yeah. Now that makes a whole lot of sense. Dr. Harris, what do you say? Because I hear this a lot. What do you say to the person who says, Dr. Harris, I believe everything you say, I hear everything, but I didn't have anything to do with my 4 parents. I wasn't born. I wasn't even here. I don't know anything about it. Why should I have to pay or suffer anything because of what they did?
Yeah.
Like you heard it too.
Yeah, but that's a myth because dominant culture has been able to get a leg up. So back to that illustration in terms of equality and equity and liberation, they still have approximately a 400-year head start. And since they have a 400-year head start, there's no way an oppressed person, a Black and brown person can make up any ground. So they still are playing a part until they reach back and help us make up the ground.
I have some on that one, LaMonte. I want to say he's the guy that writes for the Atlantic, and I always mess up his name. Tatishi or Tashashi or something like that, Coates. But he said when people come to you and say, you know, my family didn't own slave, I ain't had none. He said because they couldn't afford them. It wasn't because they didn't want to. They were just poor. So they didn't have a process to own slaves. So to say my family never did that, my family, it doesn't eliminate you from the oppression or the racism that exists, because you still benefited from being part of the dominant culture. Your resume came in with Shanika's resume, and because your name was Bob, and you went to the PWI school and she went to the HBCU school, let's say in the 70s when she wasn't even allowed to get into the PWI school, you got the job. She doesn't have a chance. She didn't have a chance Right.
Yeah.
So it's so different. And even in corporate America, when I worked at Xerox, the whole thing of being in corporate America is that here you are in corporate America and you're competing with people that have been in this system for 60 years. Your culture, your presence has only been known for the last 10 years. So they're CEOs and they hanging out together and they playing golf together and they got relationship. So when opportunities come up, your name is not in the same range as their friends that they go to church with, nor as their friends who they see at the grocery store every day. And so they have parents and grandparents who have taught them what to do and what to say and where to go. Our parents didn't have that opportunity. They couldn't prime us for that networking thing. And we weren't comfortable in those settings. And guess what? We weren't invited to those settings. So there's nowhere in the world that you can tell me, I don't see why I should be grouped in with other people that did something that caused this when I had no causal to it. Yeah, but you had the benefits of it. And you're not doing anything to speak on the benefit, which takes me to Nelson Pierce's comment. In the end, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. The reason that this here racism flourish is because we keep silent. Last night I was watching the series Madam President. It used to be Madam Secretary, then she became President. Madam President, and there was a guy who sat on the Senate impeachment council, I guess it was. And he was supposed to be her ally on that council. And every time they had witnesses come, he would yield the floor back to the speaker who was trying to destroy her. And they couldn't understand why he kept yelling. Why didn't he speak up? And when they confronted him, this is what he said. He said, I worked too hard to get to this position. Me standing up for you is going to cost me politically, and it may even cost me economically. And even though it's wrong, and I see it's wrong, and it's a scam, and I see it's a scam, I'm not speaking up because I know what I could lose. That's what racism is about. That's what sexism is about. That's what classism is about. When we aren't willing to speak truth to power because we're looking at what we might lose if we open our mouth. That's how it flourished.
King, I told you she was on fire today.
She's on fire today. I'm gonna try to get. I got one of these funeral fans. I think I'm gonna.
Yeah. Hey,
y'all clouded.
Kabrina,
well, listen.
Let me do this real quick, and then I'll let you get in, King. Kabrina, Nelson also helped us with the individual. He gave it to us phonetically also. Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates. And then Destiny, my daughter, King, had to let us know, and he's a Howard grad.
All right.
But go ahead, Dr. King.
Thank y'all so much.
He's a Howard grad, huh?
Yeah.
I'm saying then that when it comes to, what would you guys say when it comes to feelings? In other words, it's difficult for the dominant culture to really understand how we feel and what we feel about what's going on. I heard both of you say, in essence, even if you didn't cause it with your foreparents, you got 100 acres down in the South that slaves worked and everything for your family. When you were born, you had a silver spoon in your mouth. You got these connections and legacies to get into the best schools and everything else. And now you want to say, let's just deal with today. That's the past. What do you say to that person that was just the past? We, like you said, we made progress. You got a black president. Look, you got Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. You got
you ain't say Clarence Thomas. I know you didn't.
Yeah, he's
you didn't put Clarence. No.
So you got Clarence
Thomas. No, stop. Take him out. Don't do
General,
it.
Colin Powell.
That's how it flourished when we acknowledge those people. No.
Kabrina, you are really on fire today. You just gonna cut us off, huh? But I hear the point you're making, Dr. King. The fact of the matter is dominant culture looks at that as, why are you complaining? That's basically how they're looking at. You don't have no reason to complain. You as a minority don't even deserve this kind of attention. And here's another thing that helps racism flourish, Dr. King. Kabrina, here's another thing that helps make racism flourish is when Black people lose their voice. When we muffle ourselves. Not, Nelson reminded us that it's the silence of our friends, but you know what? We can internalize and say it's the silence of our own selves. When we don't speak truth to power, when we go ahead and muzzle ourselves because we don't want to rock the boat, we don't want to shake the cart, because they see us as a good colored guy or a good colored girl or gal. And the issue is that's the position that we see the Clarence Thomases fulfilling. All right. So I understand, Kabrina, why you had such a reaction to that, because you don't see him as one of us. But in their eyes, dominant culture,
their eyes, that's how
they see that as advancement, and we don't have no reason to be complaining. Go ahead.
Particularly when he turns around and says we don't need affirmative action.
Exactly.
When he benefited from it and then turns around and said we don't need it, they're saying, there you go, there's one of yours.
Exactly.
Now, what I find ironic is progress is measured by how fast I become white. The problem with that is inevitably I can never truly become white. No matter how high you climb up the corporate ladder or anything else, I've been there. Somebody would tell one of them jokes or ask about some watermelon or some chicken. I mean, you at the top level, you're on the 100th floor, and those kinds of things still come out.
Dr. King, you are so right. You are so right. And even in, everybody thinks the modern sports world is the equalizer, is the religion that brings us all together. Even they have the audacity to say when Tiger Woods won the Masters, or I guess they're going to serve some fried chicken and watermelon.
Watermelon, exactly.
In a way to keep everything in perspective, that we still got the good old white boys club.
Exactly. And even in football, of course, the question always is the Black quarterback smart enough? Breaking every record, doing everything else. We know he's athletic. Is he smart enough to lead a team?
Let me bring it into our world, though. Is the Black preacher solid doctrinally and exegetically and theologically good enough for us to listen to?
No, the word is heresy. Does he avoid heresy? That's what they say.
No, they'll say that we play on emotion and emotionalism, as though we can't think, have the cognitive level of conversation and directing individuals. And we can't help it that we have oratorical giftedness that lift us up, and it works with our emotional fervor and passion that we have. We shouldn't see, that's one thing, Dr. King, we shouldn't even apologize for.
Right, we should be unapologetically Black.
We're unapologetically Black, and there's certain emotive things that we can tap into, and we shouldn't apologize for when we use it. Hey, you have individuals in Ireland. I think the last time I was told, Irish didn't just naturally get assimilated into white until they came to the United States of America. But you have Irish preachers, Dr. King, and they got that Irish hack to their preaching. And I can't imitate it, but I know that they were hacking while we were hooping.
And don't forget now, we got a couple of the dominant culture that drug a B2 Hammond into the sanctuary, grabbed the Church of God in Christ ministry leader, started walking back and forth on the stage while he's hitting them notes in between there. Come on, somebody. You better preach, white girl.
So Nelson Pierce is blowing my mind because he's calling the roll. He's like, there's a whole bunch of people who have suffered for us not to stay silent. And so they are the reason for us to
Yeah,
complain.
we can't
All
lose,
the lives that I've lost is a reason for us to speak up.
we
It's a
can't lose our voice. As soon as we
reason.
lose our voice, then racism will continue to flourish. As soon as we keep our camera phones in our pockets, as soon as we don't rush to report, racism will continue to flourish. We have to be vigilant. We have to continue.
Now, Harris, I got to give them credit. They're pretty slick. And I'm talking about the evangelical church.
Okay.
They're pretty good at finding the good color guy, apolitical, injustice, and they will put him on revival. They'll put him at their seminaries. They'll have him preaching everywhere because he's not going to touch racism with a 10-foot pole. You know what he says the problem is? Sin. If we could get everybody saved, everybody would act saved. And if they act saved, they wouldn't be racist. If they wouldn't racist, we wouldn't have a racist world. So we don't need to talk about racism directly. We don't need to talk about specific people like Trayvon Martin. We need to talk about sin in the human heart. And they find this good color guy, and they'll run him up the flagpole and say, this is the new hero here. Instead of, we talked about speaking truth to power. Guess what? I got the employees that Kabrina talked about that work at Xerox, but my cohort got the CEO, the COO, the CFO in his church.
Yes.
But he's not preaching on racism.
Yeah.
He's not preaching to the people in human resources who hire. He's not talking to the headhunters. We got people a lot of times without the power.
Right.
And for instance, they said, my president said the churches were open this past week.
Your president?
He cared so much about the church, he went to church. Oh, I'm sorry, I got confused. He went to play golf. Go to church.
Right.
That said church is essential and we need to go, while he went to go play golf. Now, sometimes I know at least once he went to church, but the Sunday he went to church, guess what? Racism wasn't on the sermon topic.
Exactly. And Dr. King, Terry Brown aptly put it, you know, that one Black evangelical voice out there, that's their one Black friend.
Yep, that's him. He's the one that says why can't the other Black preachers be like this?
And you know, and here's the problem, and you said it, here's the word. Sin is very general.
Right.
Racism is a very specific sin.
Manifestation of sin, yeah.
As much as they want to run everybody up the flagpole on abortion and on same-sex marriage.
That's specific.
That's specific, isn't it?
Right.
And so the fact of the matter is, why hands off with racism instead of wanting to just basically paint over everything as some big general thing and use sin as the problem. But here's another word I want to ask you, Dr. King, because some of our good white evangelical brothers and sisters would submit, well, we really didn't have anything to do with it. It's just the sovereign will of God that it worked out that way. How would you respond to that?
I say, here's the problem with that. God is sovereign. That means ultimately he's in control. But much that's wrong with our world has to do with the depravity, the fall, the sinfulness, the inherent sinfulness of man. God did not ordain for little babies to get molested and for teenagers to get killed by a drunk driver. He is on the throne. This is his world. He is a sovereign God. He's able to rule and overrule.
All right.
Even to the point sending his son to deal with the sin issue. But you can't take something like slavery and everything else and say this was all part of God's wonderful plan because he loved everybody. He just loved light-skinned people a little more than he loved the dark-skinned people. So y'all had to take one for the team.
My God.
That doesn't fly. That's just bad theology.
Yeah, it's bad theology. And you know, that just kind of brushed something up in me. One of the greatest preachers we all attribute to as being one of the greatest preachers is the Apostle Paul.
Right.
You remember in Galatians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul brings up an occasion where he saw Peter perpetrating.
Right.
Playing the
hypocrite.
hypocrite.
One way with the Jews when the Jews were around, another way when they weren't around.
Exactly. Everything was fine, eating some pork rib.
Right. Ham sandwich. He had a honey
with some mayonnaise. Yeah.
Yeah. Mayonnaise, heat it up.
As soon as James's cohort comes in, Peter don't want to have nothing to do with him. But here's what the pitiful thing, and this is where we have to be careful about not assimilating into dominant culture. If you read that text, it'll say even Barnabas, the son of encouragement, he was pulled into it too, King.
Yep.
And that goes back to we got that one good black preacher.
Yep.
And sometimes if we're not careful, we'll get pulled into it with them. And so instead of speaking to the specificity of racism, we'll just talk about the problem of sin.
Right. And you know what I found out, Harris?
What?
If that good color guy, if he happens to be a hooper, well, when he speaks for them, he don't even hoop. He actually tones down who he is so that they feel a little more comfortable.
I don't have nothing to say. I just have to like that.
I'm just wondering, well, you talked about sometimes the oppressed does things to help this go on. And I think part of that is if I cease to be, I'm in California. And I remember they joked about it, and that's why I'm going to repeat it. Kenny Omer had invited Lloyd John Ogilvie.
Okay.
Lloyd John Ogilvie came and brought his choir, and they sung, and Kenny Omer's choir sung. And before Ogilvie got up to speak, Kenny Omer's choir had sung some anthem.
Okay.
And Lloyd John Ogilvie said, I'm upset with my friend here, Dr. Omer. He said, because I thought I was going to come on, we're going to come and hear some great gospel singing. And here they come with this Caucasianized anthem.
Yeah.
To do whatever instead of being who God made them to be in our expression in the way that that we do that. Now, sometimes this desire to fit in will cause us as the oppressed, will cause us to identify more with the oppressor than with our own group.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, when they talked about the house Negro and the field Negro.
Oh, you're going to go
One
there.
of the distinctions with the house Negro was, they said when the house caught on fire, he would say, boss, us house on fire. When the horse ran away, he said, us horse ran away. Boss, those field Negroes thinking about running away, boss. He telling on his own people because he identifies more with the oppressor than with who he was, part of the oppressed. And somehow in his mind, he had convinced himself that the oppressor saw him as different.
When you did that, I have to admit, I just had a Django moment.
I did too. I wish I could say it, but I can't quote it. But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Nelson brings up a good point in our chat that white evangelicals have made an idol God out of power. And if you remember last week, we discussed what those idols were. They take the Bible and they wrap it in the American flag. And patriotism is being a Republican rather than being a Democrat. It's for morality, and it's for living for the Lord Jesus. And they purport that as though individuals that believe in liberation then are Marxists and communistic and socialists, as though that's a great evil.
Right. And they also had this little concept called manifest destiny. Manifest destiny. And they believe that God put America here as a city on a hill to bring the light of the gospel to the whole world. So in actuality, Harris, we actually did y'all a favor from getting y'all from over to Africa and bringing y'all over here to introduce y'all to the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who happens to incidentally to have blonde hair and blue eyes and a little halo around his head. Even though he's from the Mideast, he happens to look that way. And we did y'all a favor because God put us here as a nation to go and get you uncivilized people and
savages
and teach y'all some stuff.
Exactly.
This conversation is going really good, but I don't want us to miss the opportunity to really get into how then, with all this, we understand, we talked about it. How do we combat this? What do we do?
One thing we do for sure is we have to continue to speak against racism.
I've been saying that the whole time.
And we have to encourage our evangelical brothers to do the same. While I'm telling the worker on the floor what he should and shouldn't do and what God requires, he needs to be telling the CEO sitting in front of him what God does and doesn't require. We need to have the courage to do that. Don't tone down, speak up. Don't deny, but prevail. The Jews say 6 million got killed in Germany, and they have a saying, never again. We got 100 million black bodies fertilizing the Middle Passage between where they brought the slaves over to America. 100 million. We need the attitude of never again. And we need to constantly bring up. I saw on Twitter this morning a disturbing story, and I think I read it before, but it came up again. There was a 14-year-old boy somewhere in the South who got electrocuted, the youngest person ever. And the only reason was he took the white people, he knew where the bodies was and he took them. Years later, it was proven that he did not do it. They electrocuted him, 14 years old. We have to remind them of stuff like this.
And the only way we can remind individuals is we can never forget. And I'm just so proud of relationship. And my good friend, Pastor David Brawley in Brooklyn, New York, their church does a production called My Alpha. I've told you guys this before, and it's wonderful. And the reason why it's wonderful is because it becomes a lament and celebration of individuals that endured and made it through the Middle Passage. But the big takeaway for me, Dr. King, is the reason why we never forget is because we know systemically how it's continued to carry us through. What I'm saying when I said it carries us through, when you remember where you come from, that lays a foundation for you to continue to build upon. When you deny where you come from, when you deny what happened to you, you really get into a state of, I'll just make up this word, deniability. When you get to that point, then you're not really living in reality. You're living in a false reality. You're living in a pseudo reality. So one thing that we have to do to combat racism is we can't forget. We've got to remind ourselves we can't forget, and we got to continue to tell them. And when I say tell them, tell dominant culture.
Right. There also has to be an understanding of the psychology and the impact of racism. In other words, we can internalize racism. Carter G. Woodson in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, says that when you control a person's mind, he says, and black people are taught over and over that they belong at the back door. He said, even if there is no back door, they will build one and go back there because that becomes the mentality. You keep hearing you're lazy. Guess what? We start acting lazy. You keep hearing that you're not, that you don't look good. You start to think that you don't look good. So guess what, Harris? I want some surgery to make my lips smaller. I want my nose more pointed. And guess what's ironic? They on the other side getting Botox in their lips and try to lay in a tanning booth for 6 or 7 hours.
Yeah, looking orange.
Yeah. Looking on. So we have to do that. Secondly, I think we have to help, particularly those of us who teach and preach the word, that there's more than one perspective to preach from.
Okay.
If I'm dealing with Exodus, I don't always have to be Moses. Sometimes I can take the seat and look at it from the position of an oppressed person.
That's rich. Yes. Yes.
However, the dominant culture, they always seem to be Moses leading people to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
When in actuality, they're enslaving people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to learn better to look at the lens of the Bible again. That passage on Miriam rising up against Moses,
Mm-hmm.
and God smoting her with leprosy, white as snow. Don't preach on jealousy. It wasn't simply about jealousy, because the first verse in that chapter says Moses married a Cushite Ethiopian wife. The Bible has no reason to put that in there. And then put white as snow. God smote her white as snow. It has no reason to put those two in there unless it's trying to tell you she's putting up one front, acting like God just spoke to Moses. But her real problem in there is the fact that he's married to a sister.
That's good, King. You know, that reminds me.
We have to, and then Harris, I think you told me something about the word in the New Testament, diakosune, for righteousness.
Yes, sir.
You think of it as a kind of a evanescent, kind of a non-material concept, to be righteous. What does that word, what is it closer to?
It represents right standing in the New Testament, and we use the word justification theologically, okay? But we can't divorce justification and righteousness. We have to understand justification and righteousness is a similar concept, right? And so, this is what I really want to speak to, King. And since it's on my mind, let me get it off real quick.
Let me say this real quick. That righteousness really means justice. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we're saying this. Okay, right. You're right. This is what I really want to say, though, because you talked about Miriam. You know, one of my favorite stories is Esther. And Esther protected her people from genocide.
Right.
Haman had it out for them. All right. Mm-hmm. And I've been saying this throughout this conversation. We have to not lose our voice. We have to continue to speak up. And the fact of the matter is, if it wasn't for Esther and Kabrina, I'm going to bring in Mordecai. All right. Mordecai and Esther.
And a eunuch.
Yes, we're able to subvert, to get around Haman's plot. So I think that informs me, Dr. King, that when we are in the presence of our white evangelical brothers and sisters, that whether they like it or not, one of the things we're going to preach about is racism.
Right.
Because if they're not going to do it, we need to start doing it.
So one of the quotes that came up was from Quick, which said, Reverend Lamar wrote a brilliant article called "It's Not Just Corona, Bad Theology is Killing Us."
I just got it today. From my friend David Brawley.
Yeah, and I love it because, and I didn't stop you all in the conversation because that's what y'all talking about. When we take theology, you know, my shirt straight out of context. Theology matters is that when we understand our theology, our language, and we can help others to understand that theology, it makes a big difference. So a question came up. Is it possible that we should call into question the priorities of white evangelicals? Maybe we've been a solid mess of evangelical pottage.
Maybe we've been sold a mess.
Sold. I missed the word sold. Yes, a mess of evangelical pottage in exchange for our true Christian birthright.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. What was the first part of that? Go to the first part again.
Is it possible that we should call into question the priorities of white evangelicals?
Right there. That's what I want to get to. Their priorities has never been racism, and we need to call them to account to help fight with civil rights and racism, because in doing so, you're on the side of God. You couple yourself with God, who believes in the dignity of all humanity, because all humanity was made in the image and the likeness of God. It has not been a priority. Like I said, they basically got 1 and 2, homosexuality and abortion. Abortion, homosexuality. Those are their big poster board sins. And when it's time to stand up for justice, righteousness, for against racism. They seem to be missing on every account. They just want to talk about that's a sin in general. And if we can change the human heart, that will fix things. So we need to constantly push them, and we need to push for legislation. We need to here's the genius of Christianity. The Bible says we're salt and we're light. And light pushes away darkness. Here's the genius of Christianity. I'm a pastor. Dr. Harris is a pastor. Sister Kabrina, you're a Bible teacher. Our job is to equip all of the saints, some of whom are in politics, some of whom are in medicine, some of whom are in law, some of whom are in architecture, some of whom are in all of the different fields. As we equip them to think biblically, theologically, then they can go and become that change in different areas. You and I, there were two great preachers up in New York and Brooklyn, Bill Jones and Gardner C. Taylor. Gardner C. Taylor was a great orator, statesman. Bill Jones was a roll up your sleeve, civil rights leader, activist. Gardner Taylor would preach to his congregation, and those who were senators and lawmakers and legislators would go out and apply. Bill Jones would preach to his congregation, but Kabrina, he had a line item in the church budget. That's what it was for.
What was it for?
To bail him out when he got arrested for protesting. The church approved the budget. Kabrina, they approved the budget, Kabrina. This money he has set aside to get Rebs out so he can be there by 6 o'clock on Wednesday for Bible study. Two different approaches, but both of these great preachers were addressing the challenges that faced our community in a different way.
Dr.
So if we
King,
put people who can do these things and work in these areas, we're doing our job.
Yeah, our commitment is to cut it straight, to do our best at rightly dividing the word as it's put in the King James Version translation. And I'm well aware of a lot of us that make that claim. We say that we want to preach the whole counsel of God, all right? The whole counsel of God includes everything in our canon of scriptures. Amen. Here's one caveat, though.
You can't just be a faith preacher. I'm a faith preacher.
Exactly. We just can't find that little niche. We have to really preach the whole counsel. Here's my issue, Dr. King. I'm speaking theologically.
Okay.
We have to be careful at the same time. Every passage, every book of the Bible does not speak to a certain point or a certain thought or a certain idea.
Exactly.
Authorial intention. Preach the text, what the author's intention was back then there. Mm-hmm. Find timeless principles that come over even into 21st century. Deliver it and give application to it today should be the aim of every preacher. And so if I'm speaking about social justice, I know where to go. I go to Amos. Okay. I go to Habakkuk. I go to individuals that I know are speaking to that.
Right.
And the problem is some of us want to avoid certain subjects. So that's why we don't go to certain books of the Bible.
Exactly. And the beauty of the Bible is it is so balanced. I read in there that if a man don't work,
man don't eat.
Not to eat. And so all you lazy people ought not to be fed. That sounds real right-wing Republican to me. You know what? That's okay. But I also read that we should treat everybody fairly and love our neighbor as ourselves. So that means that everybody that's qualified, certified to have a job, I'm going to fight for them to have the right to get that job against people who are racist and don't want to accept them. Now, that sounds very democratic. But listen, it's balanced. You don't work, you don't eat. That's true. Get with that, right?
Yes.
And then on the other hand, God says we ought to fight for the right for everybody who's qualified, bona fide, certified to get the job if they qualify.
Preach, King.
So don't just tell me about the lazy people. We need to say something to the people who only hire men, who only hire people of a certain color.
Mhm.
We want to hire people who are connected with their family.
King, and Jesus puts the responsibility on us. He
Right.
says, the poor you will have with you
Always.
So you got the responsibility to see about. And when you see about them, you seen the least of them, you're actually taking care of my wishes.
Right. So if you want to be theological, I hear you saying you love everybody. I'm gonna make sure you got an opportunity. I'm gonna leave some poor people around you all the time just to see how much you care about poor people.
And you say you want to be pro-life? I want to see if you're going to really be
from
pro-life.
the cradle to the grave. Yeah, from the cradle to the grave. I don't want you just let them be born and then die, getting shot in the back with poverty or bad health care. I want from the cradle to the grave. Let's see what you do.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the Bible, you're right. The Bible is balanced if we will simply take the authorial intent and let the Bible speak.
Might I say authorial intent for you and me is very important, not reader response.
Yes. So y'all, our time is running out. So I wanted to say, I love the comment that just popped up on our side. It said theologically practice. In other words, let's practice this theology, not just talk about it, but let's live it, you know, this theology and be a part of it.
And I think that's a good one. I think that's a good one to end on. We're going to take a little bit of time to recharge our batteries, look at some issues, come up with some very cogent stuff, and we'll be coming back. I've enjoyed Kabrina, the fellowship, straight out of context, and Dr. Harris, whom we talk every day. And we just started this out, just chopping things up the way we're doing and really trying to push the church to, I always say this, the church faces two great challenges. We've got to get people to join the church. That's challenge number one. Challenge number two is we've got to get the church to join Jesus. That's challenge number two.
Wow.
Kabrina, if we can do those two things.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. Larry, you want to say something before we close out this season?
I'm really thankful to you and thankful to LaMonte for teaming up, for us partnering together. I really believe that as we continue to look and see where individuals are itching, that we'll scratch the itch. And so I'm looking forward to season 2. And I know you're going to give information to when season 2 will start. But I'm just like hippopotamus happy, y'all. So I want to tell all of our listeners and all of our viewers, you can go to my ministry page, Larry L. Harris Ministries. I'm hosting Fresh Takes on that page, but Fresh Takes is the 3 of us. And I want you to share your emojis, your hearts, and all of those things.
And ideas for the next season.
That'll be good too. But even add this to it. You can still look at every single talk show that we've had over the last 8 weeks, and you can direct traffic there. That will help us to continue to grow also. Thank you all.
Till next time.
Okay, my little part. I want to say thank you to our viewers, those that have come every week. We are so grateful. We never want to forget to say thank you because it's critical and it's what we believe. The second thing, we'll be back. We realize the summer is family. We usually we have conventions during this time, but I don't know what that's going to look like. But I think it's going to be
conventions.
Conventions, yeah, we're going to have conventions. We have those during the summertime, and we have family reunions and all the other things that's going to take your time. And so we don't want to fight against that. So we're going to start back up in August, and you'll just watch our page and you'll see our announcements of the upcoming. I'm looking forward. I'm just going to put my personal one out there. I'm looking for our conversation about how your theology hurt other people. That's the conversation I'm waiting to hear about.
We see you waving the flag, Sister Soldier.
We will see y'all next time. Everybody be blessed.
Thank you so much. Love y'all. Take care.
God bless you.